You are listening to the audio production of He's Where the Joy Is, Audio Bible Study Experience, Getting to Know the Captivating God of the Trinity by Tara-Leigh Cobble, published by Lifeway Press. This book is read by the author. To access the supplemental material associated with this audiobook, please visit women.lifeway.com/where the joy is. A word from the author. If you had to describe God's personality, what would you say? Not what he does, but his demeanor. Not what he's capable of, but what he's like. Here's how King David described God. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. Psalm 16, verse 11. He also said God's presence brings him gladness and joy. Psalm 21, verse 6. Does it surprise you to know that God is happy? He is infinitely joyful. And because he's so delighted, that's how he can be delightful to us, by sharing who he is with us. If joy is your goal, knowing the Triune God will be supremely useful to you. In fact, this is the only path to true joy. But that doesn't mean it will be an easy path. Everything beautiful in life has some level of unavoidable difficulty attached to it, including our best and strongest relationships. In every relationship, you have to go through the process of getting to know the other person. Along the way, you'll face misunderstandings and miscommunications. Maybe you encounter unmet expectations, all as a part of building the relationship. People are wonderfully complex, aren't we? Our relationship with God has a lot of those same complexities because he's a person too. 3 persons, actually: Father, Son, and Spirit. You're likely here because you already agree with the idea of the Trinitarian God of the Bible, but you don't necessarily know what that means. So, to a certain degree, I'll assume we're on the same page and that I don't need to spend a lot of time convincing you God exists or the Bible is true. However, even those of us who consent to believe in the Trinity have a hard time grasping exactly what or who it is they are. See how complex it already feels? J.I. Packer said the doctrine of the Trinity confronts us with perhaps the most difficult thought that the human mind has ever been asked to handle. It is not easy, but it is true. Someone once said, if you don't believe in the Trinity, you will lose your soul. But if you try to understand it, you will lose your mind. It's true that some things are beyond our complete knowledge, but they aren't beyond our partial knowledge. So in this study, we'll make it our aim to know the highest percentage of what our minds can possibly grasp. After all, knowing him is the path to joy, and I want as much joy as possible. What makes this doctrine so challenging? Why do people tend to brush over it instead of dig in? Here are a few things that contribute to our collective confusion and difficulty with the Trinity. Simplified explanations. If you've ever been part of a Bible study or a Sunday school class that talked about the Trinity, you've likely heard analogies of shamrocks and eggs and H2O. Maybe someone has drawn a picture of a triangle or a shield. Every analogy of the Trinity breaks down at some level, simply because there's nothing else in existence quite like God. Everything else has a point of origin and relies on the things around it for its definition. But God is uncreated and has always been who he is. Some analogies are better than others, but even those require caveats. Other analogies are downright heretical, which is to say, they tell more of a lie about God than a truth, and they're more harmful than helpful in giving us a right view of God. He isn't dependent on anything else to be who he is. So when we compare him to something that inherently is dependent on something else, it will always lead us down the wrong path. We crave analogies because they seem to help simplify God, and we prefer to simplify him because it's easier than studying his complexity. But is that how you want to be known? Is that how you aim to build a relationship with anyone you love? Simplified explanations fall short of being enlightening or fulfilling in our relationship with God. Selfishness. This answer may not apply to you, but it certainly does to me. My selfishness was one of the biggest hurdles that kept me from digging into the Trinity. I preferred to focus on God's promises to me and all the things he could do to benefit me, so I was content to stop short of looking for who he is. I tuned out when someone mentioned the Trinity. Not because I already knew all the details, but because I didn't yet know enough. I was in for a real surprise when I did begin to study the Trinity. It isn't just a theological concept.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?